Paradise has a way of making people disappear. Not in the way you'd imagine, not with violence or spectacle, but quietly, gradually, like the tide pulling sand from beneath your feet until you realize you're standing in deeper water than you thought. Costa Rica, 1998, the Pacific coast, a place where the jungle breathes and the ocean never stops moving, where surfers from California and Colorado and Canada come searching for perfect waves and cheaper beer and something they can't quite name. They arrive with backpacks and board bags. They stay in hostels with names like Casa del Sol and Tranquilo Lodge. They learn enough Spanish to order food and flirt. They talk about the waves like other people talk about religion. Most of them leave after a few weeks. Some stay longer. A very few never leave at all. This is a story about one of those. His name was Jake Brennan, 24 years old, from Huntington Beach, California. Blonde hair, sun-bleached, almost white. Skin the color of teak, the kind of guy who could fix an engine or read a wave or make friends in any language. He disappeared on March 17, 1998, St. Patrick's Day. While his friends back home were drinking green beer, Jake was paddling out into water that looked like glass. He never came back. For 16 years, his family searched. His mother flew down 3 times. His father hired private investigators. His younger sister put up flyers in every surf town from Tamarindo to Pavones. Nothing. The case went cold, not because people stopped caring, but because in a place like Costa Rica in 1998, things could vanish without explanation. A person could walk into the jungle and simply cease to exist. The local police did what they could, which wasn't much. They interviewed witnesses. They searched the beaches. They dragged parts of the ocean floor. They found nothing. No body. No evidence, no answers. Just questions that multiplied like bacteria in warm water. Did he drown? Did he get lost in the jungle? Did something darker happen? Something involving the wrong people or the wrong deal or the wrong moment? Nobody knew. And then in 2014, a fisherman found something. Not Jake, not exactly, but something that would finally pull the truth out of the water where it had been hiding for 16 years. This is that story. Not a mystery with a neat solution. Not a tale of good versus evil, but something more complicated, something that reveals how paradise can become a trap, how freedom can become isolation, how the things we run toward can be the things that destroy us. The Pacific Ocean holds secrets the way the jungle holds shadows, deep, patient, waiting for the right moment to reveal what it's been keeping. That moment came in 2014, but to understand what was found, you need to understand what was lost. You need to go back to 1998, to a time before smartphones and GPS and instant communication, when traveling meant actually disappearing from your old life, when calling home required finding a payphone and a calling card, when paradise was still remote enough to be dangerous. Jake Brennan arrived in Costa Rica on February 12, 1998. He flew into San Jose with a one-way ticket and $800 in traveler's checks. He took a bus to the coast. The kind of bus with chickens in the aisle and salsa music blaring from blown speakers. He got off in a town called Playa Hermosa, not the famous one near Guanacaste, the other one, the smaller one. The one where serious surfers went to escape the tourists, population maybe 300. One main road, a handful of sodas serving casados and imperial beer, 2 surf shops, a police station that was only staffed 3 days a week. Jake rented a room above a pulperia for $30 a month. Concrete walls, a fan that rattled, a window that looked out at the ocean. He could hear the waves from his bed. He spent his days surfing. His evenings drinking beer with other travelers, his nights sleeping hard and dreamless. He wrote letters home. His mother saved everyone. They were full of descriptions of waves and sunsets and the kindness of strangers. He sounded happy. More than happy. He sounded free. In his last letter dated March 14th, he wrote, "I think I could stay here forever. There's something about this place that feels like home, in a way home never did." 3 days later, he was gone. Jake Brennan was not running from anything. That's important to understand. Because when young Americans disappear in foreign countries, people assume darkness, drugs, debt, danger. some secret shame that drove them away. But Jake wasn't that story. He grew up in Huntington Beach in a house 3 blocks from the pier. His father sold insurance. His mother taught elementary school. His sister Emily was 2 years younger and worshipped him the way younger siblings do. He learned to surf at 7. By 15, he was good enough to compete. Not good enough to go pro, but good enough that surfing became the organizing principle of his life. He graduated high school with decent grades, worked construction for 2 years, saved money. Talked about traveling, about seeing the world's best breaks, about living somewhere the waves were uncrowded and the living was cheap. His parents thought it was a phase. They figured he'd go for a few months, get it out of his system, come home and settle into real life. They didn't understand that for Jake, surfing wasn't a hobby. It was a language, a religion. His way of being in the world that made everything else feel like static. Costa Rica in 1998 was perfect for people like Jake. The country had been stable for decades, no military, a functioning democracy. A growing tourism industry, but not yet overwhelmed by it. The Pacific coast was still wild, still affordable, still the kind of place where you could live on $5 a day if you were careful. Playa Hermosa was a village built around the ocean. The main road ran parallel to the beach, dirt, rutted, impassable when it rained hard. On one side, the jungle pressed close. Howler monkeys screamed at dawn. Iguanas the size of small dogs sunned themselves on rocks. On the other side, the Pacific stretched to the horizon. The waves at Playa Hermosa were consistent, powerful, a beach break that could hold size. On good days, it was head-high and glassy. On great days, it was double overhead and perfect. Jake surfed every day, usually at dawn, sometimes again in the afternoon if the swell was good. He paddled out alone most mornings. By the time other surfers arrived, he'd already caught a dozen waves. He made friends easily. There was a rotating cast of travelers, Australians, Brazilians, Europeans on gap years. They'd drink together at night, share information about other breaks, lend each other wax or board shorts or sunscreen. But Jake also spent time with locals. There was a fisherman named Carlos who took him out on his boat, a woman named Rosa who ran the pulperia and cooked him meals, a kid named Miguel who wanted to learn English and followed Jake around asking questions. Jake fit in. That was his gift. He could talk to anyone. He didn't judge. He listened. He laughed easily. He helped people fix things. He seemed happy. His routine was simple. Wake at dawn, surf, eat breakfast at Rosa's, read in the shade, surf again if the conditions were good. Play cards with other travelers, drink a few beers, sleep. It was the kind of life that looks idyllic from the outside. And maybe it was. Or maybe it was just simple enough that the complications hadn't revealed themselves yet. Money wasn't an issue. Jake was careful. He'd budgeted for 6 months. He worked occasionally, helped Carlos repair his boat, did some carpentry for a hostel owner. Nothing formal, just enough to stretch his savings. He talked about staying longer. Maybe getting a work visa, maybe teaching English, maybe opening a surf shop. He wrote to his family about these ideas. His mother wrote back, encouraging him. His father was more cautious. Emily just wanted him to be happy. In early March, Jake met someone. Her name was Laura. She was Canadian, from Vancouver, 26 years old, traveling alone. She'd been in Costa Rica for 3 weeks. She was a photographer. She carried a Nikon and shot everything on film. They met at a beach bonfire, started talking about waves, ended up talking until sunrise. They spent the next week together, surfing, exploring, taking a bus to a waterfall in the mountains, sitting on the beach at sunset. Jake's friends noticed he seemed lighter, more present. He talked about maybe traveling with Laura when she left, maybe going to Nicaragua, maybe seeing where things went. On March 16th, Laura left for San Jose. She had a flight back to Canada the next day. She asked Jake to come with her, to spend one more night together before she flew out. He said no. He said he wanted to surf the next morning. The swell was supposed to be good. He'd catch the bus to San Jose the day after. They'd figure out a plan. Maybe he'd visit Vancouver. Maybe she'd come back to Costa Rica. They kissed goodbye at the bus stop. Laura took a photo of him standing in front of the ocean. The last photo anyone took of Jake Brennan alive. That night, Jake had dinner with Carlos and Rosa. They ate grilled fish and rice, drank beer, talked about the weather. Carlos said the swell was building. Tomorrow would be good. Maybe the best day of the month. Jake went to bed early. He wanted to be in the water at first light. He never made it. March 17th, 1998. Dawn. The ocean was perfect. Glassy, head-high sets, offshore wind. The kind of morning surfers dream about. The kind that makes you believe the universe is paying attention. Jake's surfboard was gone. That's the first thing people noticed. His board. A 6'2" thruster, white with a blue rail. He kept it leaned against the wall outside his room. Every morning it was there. Every evening he brought it back. On the morning of March 17th it wasn't there. Rosa saw Jake leave his room around 5:45 a.m. She was opening the pulperia. She waved. He waved back. He was carrying his board. Wearing his usual trunks, no shirt, no shoes. He walked toward the beach. That was the last confirmed sighting. By 9 a.m. other surfers were in the water. Good waves, a dozen people out. Nobody saw Jake. Nobody remembered seeing him paddle out. By noon, people started asking questions. One of the Australian guys, a surfer named Damon, went to Jake's room. The door was unlocked. Everything was there. His backpack, his passport, his money, his clothes. Nothing missing except Jake and his board. Damon asked around. Nobody had seen him since dawn. By 2 p.m. they called the police. The police station in Playa Hermosa was a small concrete building with 2 officers. Officer Vargas took the report. He asked the standard questions. How long had Jake been missing? Was he depressed? Did he use drugs? Did he owe anyone money? The answers were all no. Vargas organized a search. By 4 p.m., 20 people were walking the beach, looking for a body, looking for a board, looking for anything. They found nothing. The ocean was calm, visibility was good. If Jake had drowned close to shore, someone would have seen. If his board had broken, pieces would have washed up. But there was nothing. Vargas expanded the search. They walked the jungle trails. They checked the roads. They asked at every house and business within 5 miles. Nobody had seen Jake. By nightfall, the search paused. Vargas called for backup from the regional office. He requested a helicopter. He contacted the Coast Guard. Jake's friends stayed up all night. They built a fire on the beach. They took turns walking the shoreline with flashlights. They hoped he'd stumble out of the jungle. Injured, maybe. Lost. But alive. He didn't. March 18th. The search intensified. A helicopter flew the coastline. Spotters looked for a body in the water. For a board. For any sign. Nothing. Divers went down near the rocks where the current was strongest. They searched for 2 hours, found nothing. Police interviewed everyone in town, tourists, locals, fishermen, shop owners. The story was always the same. Jake was a good guy, friendly, no enemies, no problems. He went surfing and never came back. Carlos the fisherman took his boat out. He knew the currents. He knew where bodies usually washed up. He searched for 3 days. Nothing. On March 20th, Jake's parents were notified. His mother, Linda, flew down immediately. She arrived in San Jose on March 22nd, took a bus to the coast, walked into the police station and demanded answers. Officer Vargas told her everything they knew, which was almost nothing. Linda stayed for 2 weeks. She put up flyers. She hired a local guide to search the jungle. She offered a reward, $5,000 for information. Nobody came forward. She met with Laura, the Canadian girl, who flew back down when she heard. Laura was devastated. She kept saying she should have made him come to San Jose. She should have insisted. Linda told her it wasn't her fault, but Laura didn't believe it. Jake's father, Tom, arrived on March 25th. He was a practical man. He wanted facts. He wanted a body. He wanted closure. He got none of those things. The police theory was drowning. It was the simplest explanation. Jake paddled out, got caught in a current, drowned. His body was pulled out to sea, but Tom didn't buy it. Jake was a strong swimmer. He knew the ocean. He'd surfed bigger waves in more dangerous places. And where was the board? Surfboards float. Even if Jake drowned, the board should have washed up. Somewhere. Eventually. But it didn't. Tom pushed for a criminal investigation. He suspected foul play, maybe robbery. Maybe Jake saw something he shouldn't have. Maybe he got involved with the wrong people. The police investigated. They looked into local crime, drug trafficking, theft, violence. Playa Hermosa was quiet, almost no crime. The worst thing that had happened in the past year was a bar fight. There was no evidence of foul play, no witnesses, no motive, no suspects. Just a missing surfer and an ocean that refused to give up its secrets. By mid-April, the official search ended. The case remained open, but resources were limited. The police had other priorities. Jake's parents went home. They left behind flyers and a reward offer, and a hole in their lives that would never close. For the next 16 years, they searched. Linda came back 3 times. She hired private investigators. She contacted journalists. She posted on early internet forums about missing persons. Tom spent thousands of dollars. He followed leads that went nowhere. He talked to psychics and conspiracy theorists and anyone who claimed to have information. Emily, Jake's sister, graduated college, got married, had kids, but she never stopped looking. She kept a file. Every scrap of information, every theory, every dead end. The case became a ghost story in Playa Hermosa. Locals would tell tourists about the American surfer who disappeared. Some said he drowned. Some said he ran away. Some said darker things. The truth was nobody knew. And then in 2014, the ocean finally spoke. The investigation in 1998 was thorough by local standards. But local standards in a small Costa Rican beach town were not the same as what Jake's family expected. There was no CSI team, no forensic analysis, no database of missing persons. There was Officer Vargas, a helicopter, some divers, and a lot of questions with no answers. Vargas was a good cop. He'd been with the Fuerza Pública for 12 years. He knew the area. He knew the people. He knew how to read a situation. And this situation didn't make sense. Drownings happened. Tourists underestimated the ocean. They got drunk and went swimming at night. They ignored warnings about riptides. They panicked when they got pulled out. But Jake wasn't a tourist. He was a surfer. He knew the water. He'd been surfing Playa Hermosa for over a month. He knew where the currents were. He knew when to paddle out and when to stay on the beach, and he'd gone out on a perfect morning. Calm, clean, no reason to panic. Vargas interviewed everyone who'd been in the water that day. There was Damon, the Australian. He'd paddled out around 7 a.m. He'd surfed for 2 hours. He didn't see Jake. There was a Brazilian couple. They'd been out since dawn. They didn't see Jake either. There was a local kid named Esteban. He'd been surfing the south end of the beach. He saw someone paddle out early, maybe 6 a.m., but he couldn't say for sure it was Jake. It was still dark, just a silhouette. That was the closest thing to a lead. Vargas walked the beach at dawn the next day. He timed it. At 5:45 a.m., when Rosa saw Jake leave, it would have been just light enough to see. By 6:01 a.m., there would have been enough light to surf. If Jake paddled out at 6 a.m. and nobody saw him after that, what happened in those first 15 minutes? Vargas considered the possibilities. Possibility 1. Jake drowned immediately, hit his head on his board, lost consciousness, sank. But the water was calm. No big waves, no reason to fall. Possibility 2. Jake was attacked by a shark. Shark attacks were rare in Costa Rica. Not unheard of, but rare. And usually there was evidence. Blood. A damaged board. Witnesses. There was none of that. Possibility 3. Jake had a medical emergency, heart attack, seizure, stroke. Jake was 24. Healthy, athletic. No history of medical problems. Unlikely. Possibility 4. Jake didn't drown. He left voluntarily. But why and where? And why leave everything behind? His passport, his money, his belongings? It didn't fit. Possibility 5. Foul play. This was the one Tom Brennan believed. He pushed Vargas hard on this. Vargas investigated. He looked into everyone Jake knew. Carlos the fisherman, Rosa, the other travelers, the locals. Nobody had a motive. Nobody had a history of violence. Nobody acted suspicious. Vargas checked for recent crimes in the area. Robberies, assaults, disappearances. Nothing. He contacted police in neighboring towns. Had anyone seen Jake? Had anyone seen his board? No. He checked bus stations, airports, border crossings. No record of Jake leaving the country. Vargas even considered the possibility that Jake had been kidnapped, but there was no ransom demand, no contact, no evidence. After 6 weeks, Vargas had exhausted every lead. He wrote a report. Conclusion: accidental drowning, body lost at sea. Tom Brennan rejected this. He hired a private investigator, a former DEA agent named Rick Holloway who'd worked in Central America for 20 years. Holloway arrived in May 1998. He spent 3 weeks in Playa Hermosa. He re-interviewed everyone. He looked for inconsistencies. He followed hunches. He found nothing new. Holloway's theory was darker. He thought Jake had stumbled into something, maybe drug trafficking. The Pacific coast was a corridor for cocaine moving north from Colombia. Small planes, fast boats, isolated beaches. Maybe Jake saw something. Maybe he was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Holloway talked to fishermen. He asked about unusual activity, boats at night, strangers, anything out of the ordinary. Nobody knew anything, or nobody was talking. Holloway left after 3 weeks. He told Tom there was nothing more he could do. He said the truth was probably simple. Jake drowned. The ocean took him. Tom didn't accept it. But he didn't know what else to do. Linda came back in 1999. She brought new flyers. She offered a bigger reward, $10,000. Still nothing. She met with a local priest, Father Miguel. He'd been in Playa Hermosa for 30 years. He knew everyone. Father Miguel told her the ocean was unpredictable. He'd seen it take people before, good swimmers, experienced fishermen. The ocean didn't care. He said a mass for Jake. Linda attended. She cried through the whole thing. In 2000, Linda hired a psychic. She was desperate. The psychic said Jake was at peace, that he'd drowned but hadn't suffered, that his body was far out at sea. It didn't help. In 2002, Tom contacted the FBI. They said they couldn't help. No evidence of a crime, no jurisdiction. In 2005, Emily started a website, Missing in Costa Rica. She posted Jake's story. She asked for information. She got emails, dozens of them, people claiming to have seen Jake in Panama, in Nicaragua, in Mexico, in California. Every lead was false. The years passed. The case grew colder. Jake's friends moved on. Damon went back to Australia. Laura stopped responding to emails. The other travelers scattered. Carlos the fisherman died in 2008. Rosa closed her pulperia in 2010. Playa Hermosa changed. More tourists, more development. The dirt road was paved. New hotels went up. The old-timers still remembered Jake, but the new people didn't know the story. By 2014, 16 years had passed. Linda was 62. Tom was 65. Emily had 2 kids. They'd never stopped hoping. But hope had become something different. Not hope for answers. Just hope that someday they'd know. And then, on a Tuesday in July 2014, a fisherman named Rodrigo was checking his nets 2 miles offshore. He found something tangled in the line. Not a fish. Time is the cruelest investigator. It doesn't solve cases. It buries them, under new stories. New tragedies. New lives that move forward while the missing stay frozen in the past. For the Brennan family, time was a weight that never lifted. Linda kept Jake's room exactly as he'd left it, his surfboard leaning in the corner, the one he didn't take to Costa Rica, his trophies from high school competitions on the shelf, his Huntington Beach high school diploma on the wall. She'd go in there sometimes, sit on his bed, touch his things, try to remember his voice. It was getting harder. Tom threw himself into work. He sold insurance. He was good at it. He didn't talk about Jake unless someone asked, and most people stopped asking after the first few years. At night, he'd sit in his garage and drink beer and look at the file. The police reports, the investigators' notes, the timeline, the theories. He'd read it all again. looking for something he'd missed, some detail that would crack it open. He never found it. Emily tried to live a normal life. She got married in 2003. Her husband, David, was patient. He understood that Jake's disappearance was a shadow that followed her everywhere. She had a daughter in 2006, named her Jacqueline. Jackie, after Jake. She told Jackie stories about her uncle, the surfer who loved the ocean, who was kind and funny and free, who disappeared into paradise and never came back. Jackie asked questions Emily couldn't answer. Where did he go? Is he still alive? Will we ever find him? Emily said she didn't know, but she hoped. She always hoped. The case file sat in a storage box in the Huntington Beach Police Department, officially open, practically forgotten. In Costa Rica, life moved on. Playa Hermosa grew. By 2010, it was unrecognizable from the village Jake had known. Paved roads, ATMs, a grocery store, Wi-Fi in the cafes. The old pulperia where Rosa had worked was now a smoothie bar. The room Jake had rented was torn down. Their boutique hotel stood in its place. The beach was crowded. Surf schools, tourists with rented boards, Instagram photos. The locals who remembered Jake were fewer each year. Officer Vargas retired in 2006. He moved to San Jose. He thought about Jake sometimes. The case that never closed. The American kid who vanished. He'd done everything he could. He believed that. But it still bothered him. Father Miguel, the priest, died in 2011. He'd prayed for Jake every year on March 17th. After he died, nobody continued the tradition. The story became a legend, distorted, embellished. Some people said Jake had been running drugs. Some said he'd faked his death. Some said he'd been murdered by locals who resented tourists. None of it was true, but truth doesn't matter much to legends. Laura, the Canadian photographer, never went back to Costa Rica. She got married in 2004, had a son, built a life in Vancouver. But she kept the photo, the last one she took of Jake, standing in front of the ocean, smiling. She looked at it sometimes, wondered what would have happened if she'd made him come to San Jose that night, if she'd insisted. She knew it was irrational. But guilt doesn't care about logic. By 2014, the case was a ghost. The Brennan family had accepted, in the way you accept things you can't change, that they'd probably never know. Linda had stopped going to Costa Rica. That hurt too much. The place that had taken her son. Tom had stopped reading the file. It was just a reminder of failure. Emily had stopped updating the website. Nobody visited it anymore. They talked about Jake on his birthday, on the anniversary of his disappearance, on holidays. But the conversations were shorter each year. There was less to say. And then Rodrigo pulled up his nets. Rodrigo was 53. He'd been fishing the waters off Playa Hermosa for 30 years. He knew every current, every reef, every place the fish gathered. On July 15, 2014, he was 2 miles offshore, checking his nets. It was late afternoon. The sun was low. The water was calm. His net was heavier than usual. He pulled it up slowly, hand over hand, the rope rough against his palms. When the net broke the surface, he saw it, a surfboard, tangled in the net, covered in barnacles. The fiberglass cracked and faded, but unmistakably a surfboard. Rodrigo hauled it into his boat. He looked at it closely. It was old. The barnacles told him that. It had been in the water a long time. He turned it over. On the underside, barely visible under the growth, he saw something. Letters, carved into the fiberglass. J.B. Rodrigo didn't know what it meant, but he knew it meant something. He brought the board back to shore. He showed it to his brother, who ran a surf shop. His brother looked at the board, looked at the initials, and remembered. The American surfer. The one who disappeared 16 years ago. His name was Jake something, Jake Brennan, JB, they called the police. The call came on July 16, 2014. Detective Ana Morales took it. She was with the Organismo de Investigación Judicial, the OIJ, Costa Rica's investigative police. She'd been with the OIJ for 8 years. She specialized in cold cases, missing persons, unidentified remains. The report was simple. A fisherman had found a surfboard, old. with initials carved in it. JB. Morales pulled the file. Case number 980847. Jake Brennan, American. Missing since March 17, 1998. She read through it. The witness statements, the search reports, the theories. She looked at the photos. Jake smiling, young, alive. She looked at the date. 16 years. She drove to Playa Hermosa the next day. The surfboard was in the police station. Morales examined it carefully. It was a 6.2 thruster, white with a blue rail, exactly as described in the original report. The initials were clear once you scraped away the barnacles. J.B. Morales photographed it, documented it, sent samples to the lab for analysis. The barnacles told a story. Marine biologists could estimate how long something had been submerged based on the type and density of growth. The analysis came back 2 weeks later. The board had been in the water for approximately 15 to 17 years. It matched the timeline. But where had it been? Morales consulted with oceanographers. She wanted to know about currents, about drift patterns, about where something lost in 1998 might end up in 2014. The Pacific currents off Costa Rica were complex, influenced by wind, by season, by underwater topography. An object lost near Playa Hermosa could drift north or south or out to sea. It could travel hundreds of miles or stay relatively close, caught in an eddy, trapped against a reef. The oceanographers ran models. They estimated that the board had likely stayed within a 50-mile radius, probably caught on an underwater structure, a reef, a rock formation. Eventually, storms or currents had dislodged it. And it had drifted until Rodrigo's net caught it. But what about Jake? Morales knew that bodies and boards didn't always stay together. A drowning victim could sink. The board could float away. But usually, if a surfer drowned close to shore, the body washed up within days, sometimes weeks. Jake's body had never been found. Morales considered the possibilities. If Jake had drowned far from shore, his body could have been taken by currents, decomposed, consumed by marine life, scattered. After 16 years, there would be nothing left to find. But Morales wanted to be sure. She organized a search, not of the beach, of the area where the board was found. She brought in divers, sonar equipment, a marine archaeologist. They searched a grid, 2 miles offshore, 50 feet deep. They found the reef where the board had likely been trapped, a rocky outcrop, covered in coral, full of crevices. They searched for 3 days. On the 3rd day, they found something. Not a body. Bodies don't last 16 years in the ocean, but bones, human bones, scattered among the rocks, partially buried in sediment, picked clean by time and scavengers. Morales called in a forensic anthropologist, Dr. Carmen Ruiz. She specialized in skeletal remains. Dr. Ruiz examined the bones carefully. She identified them: femur, tibia, ribs, vertebrae, skull fragments. She estimated they'd been in the water for 15 to 20 years. She determined they belonged to a male, age 20 to 30, height approximately 5'10". Jake Brennan was 5'10", but to be certain, they needed DNA. Morales contacted the Brennan family. Linda answered the phone. It was August 12, 2014, a Tuesday afternoon. Morales introduced herself. She explained as gently as she could that they'd found a surfboard and remains. Linda didn't speak for a long time. Then she asked, "Is it him?" Morales said they needed DNA to be sure. She asked if Linda would be willing to provide a sample. Linda said yes. The DNA analysis took 6 weeks. On September 24, 2014, the results came back. Positive match. The remains were Jake Brennan. Morales called Linda again. She delivered the news. Linda cried, not from sadness, from relief. After 16 years, they finally knew. Jake had drowned. Probably on the morning of March 17, 1998, probably within the first hour of paddling out. The most likely scenario: he'd been caught in a current, pulled offshore, farther than he realized. He'd tried to paddle back, but the current was stronger. He'd exhausted himself. He'd drowned. His body had sunk, settled among the rocks. His board had floated, drifted, eventually caught on the same reef. For 16 years they'd been there, together, waiting to be found. Morales closed the case on October 1, 2014. Cause of death, accidental drowning. No foul play, no mystery, just the ocean doing what the ocean does, taking. The Brennan family flew to Costa Rica in November. They held a small ceremony on the beach at Playa Hermosa. Father Miguel's replacement, a young priest named Father Luis, said a prayer. They scattered Jake's ashes in the water. Linda said goodbye. Tom said goodbye. Emily said goodbye. They stood on the beach and watched the sun set over the Pacific. The same ocean that had taken Jake, the same ocean that had finally given him back. Paradise had kept its secret for 16 years, but in the end, the truth had surfaced. Not because of brilliant detective work, not because of new technology, but because the ocean in its own time had decided to let go. The truth, when it finally arrived, was simpler than anyone had imagined. No conspiracy, no crime. No dark secret hidden in the jungle, just a young man who paddled out into water that looked safe, who misjudged a current, who fought until he couldn't fight anymore. The ocean had been the only witness. Detective Morales wrote her final report in October 2014. She included everything. The discovery of the board, the recovery of the remains, the DNA confirmation, the oceanographic analysis. Her conclusion was clear. Jake Brennan had drowned on March 17, 1998, approximately 1 to 2 miles offshore from Playa Hermosa. His body had settled on a reef at a depth of 50 feet. His surfboard had remained trapped in the same area until dislodged by currents in 2014. There was no evidence of foul play, no signs of trauma beyond what the ocean and time had inflicted, no indication that anyone else had been involved. It was an accident, a tragedy, but not a mystery. The report was filed, the case was officially closed, but for the Brennan family, closure was more complicated than paperwork. Linda returned to Huntington Beach in late November 2014. She finally dismantled Jake's room, not because she wanted to forget, but because she could finally let go. She donated his trophies to the local surf club. She gave his clothes to charity. She kept a few things, photos, letters. The last postcard he'd sent. She framed the photo Laura had taken, Jake standing in front of the ocean, smiling, free. She hung it in the living room where she could see it every day. Tom stopped drinking in his garage. He closed the file for the last time. He put it in a box in the attic. He told friends he felt lighter, not happy, but lighter, like he'd been carrying something heavy for 16 years and had finally been allowed to set it down. He and Linda started traveling, not to Costa Rica, but to other places, places without ghosts. Emily updated the website one final time. She wrote, "After 16 years, we finally have answers. Jake drowned doing what he loved. He's at peace now. So are we." She included the photo, she included the story. She thanked everyone who had helped search. Then she archived the site. Jackie, Emily's daughter, was 8 years old when they found Jake. She asked her mother what it meant. Emily told her that sometimes people get lost, and sometimes they stay lost for a very long time, but that doesn't mean they're forgotten. She told her that Uncle Jake had loved the ocean, and the ocean had loved him back, even if it had taken him. Jackie seemed to understand. In Costa Rica, the story made local news. The headlines were respectful. American surfer found after 16 years. Cold case solved in Playa Hermosa. Ocean returns missing man to family. Rodrigo, the fisherman who'd found the board, was interviewed. He said he was glad he could help bring closure. He said the ocean gives and takes. That's its nature. He refused the reward money. He said it didn't feel right. The Brennan family donated it to a local marine conservation organization in Jake's name. Detective Morales moved on to other cases. Other missing persons, other families waiting for answers. But she thought about Jake sometimes, about how 16 years could pass in silence, about how the truth could hide in plain sight, 50 feet underwater, waiting. She thought about all the other cases that might never be solved. The people who'd vanished and would stay vanished, the families who'd never get their phone call. She felt grateful that the Brennans had gotten theirs. Doctor. Ruiz, the forensic anthropologist, wrote a paper about the case, about skeletal remains in marine environments, about how bones could survive when everything else was gone. She used Jake's case as an example, anonymous, of course. But his story helped advance the science. In some small way, Jake was still teaching, still helping. Laura, the Canadian photographer, heard about the discovery through a mutual friend. She cried for an hour. Then she pulled out the photo. The last one. Jake in front of the ocean. She'd kept it in a drawer for 16 years, too painful to look at, too important to throw away. She had it professionally printed, large, high quality. She sent it to Linda with a note. He was happy. I want you to know that. In those last days, he was truly happy, Linda wrote back. She thanked her. She said it helped to know. The two women stayed in touch after that. Not often, but occasionally. Emails on Jake's birthday, on the anniversary. Two people connected by loss, by memory, by a young man who'd loved the ocean more than safety. Playa Hermosa continued to change. By 2015, it was a full-fledged tourist destination. Hotels, restaurants, surf schools with professional instructors and liability waivers. The ocean was the same, but everything around it was different. The old-timers still told the story. But now it had an ending. The American surfer who disappeared. Who was found 16 years later. Who'd been there all along, just out of reach. Some of the surf instructors used it as a cautionary tale. Respect the ocean. Know your limits. Don't go out alone. Others saw it differently. As a reminder that the ocean was wild, unpredictable, that paradise always had teeth. Both were true. On March 17, 2015, exactly 17 years after Jake disappeared, the Brennan family returned to Playa Hermosa. All three of them. Linda, Tom, Emily. They brought Jackie. She was 9 now, old enough to understand. They walked to the beach at dawn, the same beach Jake had walked to on his last morning. The waves were small, glassy, beautiful. They stood at the water's edge. They didn't say much. There wasn't much to say. Linda thought about the last letter Jake had written, about how he'd felt at home in a way home had never felt. She understood now. He'd found what he was looking for, even if it had cost him everything. Tom thought about all the years he'd spent searching, all the theories, all the dead ends. He realized now that the answer had been there from the beginning, the simplest explanation, the one he hadn't wanted to accept. Emily thought about her brother, about the stories she'd told Jackie, about how memory could keep someone alive even when they were gone. She realized Jake wasn't really lost. He was here, in the waves. In the wind, in the stories. Jackie asked if she could go in the water. Emily said yes. They waded in together. The Pacific was warm, gentle. It lapped at their ankles. Jackie asked if Uncle Jake was still here. Emily said yes, in a way. The ocean never really lets go of what it takes. They stood there for a long time, watching the sunrise, watching the surfers paddle out, life continuing, the way it always does. When they left, Linda turned back one last time. She whispered, "Thank you for coming home." The ocean didn't answer. It never does. But the waves kept rolling in, steady, eternal, indifferent. Paradise had taken Jake Brennan, and paradise had returned him. Not whole, not alive, but returned. And for a family that had spent 16 years in the dark, that was enough. The case of Jake Brennan was closed, but his story remained, a reminder that the places we love can also be the places that destroy us. That freedom and danger are often the same thing, that the ocean keeps its secrets until it's ready to tell them, and that sometimes, after years of silence, the truth surfaces. Not because we deserve it, not because we've earned it, but because the ocean in its own time decides to let go. Jake Brennan was 24 years old when he died. He'd been searching for perfect waves, for a life less ordinary, for something he couldn't name but recognized when he found it. He found it in Costa Rica, in a small beach town, in water that looked like glass. And he stayed there, for 16 years, beneath the surface, part of the reef, part of the ocean, until a fisherman's net pulled him back into the light. His family got their answers, their closure, their goodbye. But the ocean kept something, it always does. Every wave that breaks on Playa Hermosa carries a memory. Every surfer who paddles out moves through water that once held Jake Brennan. He's part of the place now, part of the story, part of the paradise that took him. And on certain mornings when the light is just right and the water is glassy and perfect, the locals say you can feel it, a presence, a memory. A young man who loved the ocean so much he became part of it. They say the waves break a little differently on those mornings, a little cleaner, a little more perfect, as if the ocean is remembering, as if paradise is paying tribute to one of its own. Jake Brennan paddled out on March 17, 1998. He never came back, but he was never really gone. The ocean had him all along, and now, finally, everyone knew.